To people who've lived in a rough neighborhood, places with gang violence and stuff, what challenges did you face on a day-to-day basis? What experiences have stayed with you? Till that despite living in one of the worst neighborhoods of my city, which is largely regarded as the armpit of the province by people who don't live here, I really don't live in a rough neighborhood. I was a punk rock girl, just really poor, and I befriended almost everyone including the area homeless and the gangsters. I did a lot of drugs with a lot of different people to gain their trust and loyalty, and I was just 12-13 years old. Eventually I smoked enough weed, drank with enough people and fought enough girls that I wasn't an outsider anymore, and I got a name for myself. Me and my older brother were pretty well known throughout the city, and it's changed from being scared of the area to being scared of the area enemies. My friends were getting locked up, stabbed and shot at on the regular, but it was easier to live the gang life than it was to be a functioning member of society. People would rather make drug money because it's a world they know. It's all that they know. Poverty is a cycle, and I've seen firsthand how it keeps everyone where they're at. It was incredibly hard for me and my family, just me, my mom and brother, to get out the ghetto. The system treats you like you're all criminals and that we're all choosing to live like this. Me and my brother starting working crappy under the table jobs as miners to help our mom out, and eventually we moved to a nicer part of town but still in the same crappy city, and we slowly grew out of the poverty ways. It's all a distant memory now. We've all parted ways and we're all in different stages in our lives, but I still have the scars that serve as a reminder that I can't forget where I came from. Everything is a luxury. A flushing toilet, a washer and dryer, clothes with no holes, and food that's actually fresh, not microwaved or top ramen. The days of survival are over, but sometimes I'll look back and nostalgia tricks me into thinking they were better times. I can't romanticize it. It was crappy, and my mom was constantly crying about not being able to provide us better lives. The poor community needs real assistance, real education, and a government that actually cares about its people. Without it, people will continue the way they do to live another day, using drugs to escape, using violence to control, and selling drugs to make money off of its own destruction. We need to stop romanticizing poverty, both to ourselves and in the media. We had to have showers available at school so kids who has no water could still get clean. 3 of my classmates were murdered, 2 by my other classmate, right before our junior year. It's not tragically beautiful and makes for a great Hollywood backstory. It's real humans and real kids and generations of trauma. I don't know about gang violence, but when we got married our first apartment was in a rough neighborhood. We had to make more than one call to the cops about neighbors' domestic violence issues. People would often be out in the parking lot yelling, playing loud music, drinking at all hours, etc. A strip mall across the street had 2 shootings in the year we lived there. I was never even comfortable sitting on our own balcony. We are also pretty certain our neighbor across the hall was a dealer. Had different people in and out at all hours and didn't appear to work any sort of formal job. That being said, he was very friendly and we were on good terms with him. We didn't hang out with him or anything, but we always got a nod and a you good when we saw him. I always felt like he told people to leave us alone because we were never bothered. Lots and lots of domestic violence. One experience that stayed with me, lived in an apartment with just my mum. Every night man downstairs comes home blind drunk about 2 AM, rages, smashes things, his partner and her teenage daughter. No one calls police. Happens 5 nights out of the week. One night wake up scared. Again, man raging, smashing things, his partner and his teenage daughter. Fall asleep, wake up in the morning on the way to school. Woman laying on a gurney with white sheet covering her face and body. Day to day isn't too bad. Just have to be extra aware of your surroundings. The most important thing is to mind your business in the deaf blind mute way, as in you didn't see anything, didn't hear anything, and won't say anything. Bullets hitting too close to home, literally, and not being able to sleep if it's too quiet. Too quiet is the worst sound. I think the biggest challenge is growing up knowing the people creating that violence. I forgot how it came up, but in the 7th grade, I remember this kid just brought up that he slept in his living room couch with a bat because he was afraid rival gangs were gonna frick with his family. Like just was talking openly about it in front of the whole class and teacher. Looking back on it, he must have been really freaking scared to bring it up like that out of nowhere. By the end of the year, he was arrested for gun charges. Guess he felt the bat wasn't enough. This other kid sat next to me in the 6th grade. He was smart ASF but obviously in a gang. Never came to school. Saw him a few years later and he was paralyzed. Couldn't really talk or walk right anymore after a bad car accident. There was this other kid in the 2nd grade who was really sweet and super funny. Now, he's in music videos trying to be the next trap rapper waving around guns and crap. Still sweet and funny when we bump into each other. Then I started working in the hood at a high school and I remember this kid talking about wanting to get out but he couldn't. He just stopped going to school altogether. Ran into him at a Target a few years later and he was able to get out of it and get his GED. Super proud of him. This other kid wanted to get out too but he already had gun charges and had been to juvie. We talked about getting his record expunged as a minor. He seemed real interested but never followed through. That kid was smart ASF too. Gangs are predatory ASF. Grown butt men picking up young butt 12-13-year-old boys to do their dirty work. Sad ASF. Confidence gets you a long way. When I was young we lived in the ghetto in an apartment next door to my aunt and uncle. The complex had a picnic table all the kids would play on. One day 4 gang members took the table across the street and put it outside their complex and would hang out on it. My dad and uncle got together, talked it over for a bit, then walked over there. There was a brief exchange. The only thing I remember is watching my dad make the get up motion with his thumb. The 4 guys got up and my dad and uncle brought the table back. Stand for what's yours or people will take it. Show confidence or people will see weakness. This is terrible advice. I'm glad it worked out for your dad, but don't start crap over stuff you're not worth dying for. For every 9 people that respect you there's 1 that will kill you. Don't play the odds. I grew up in probably the 2nd worst part of our city, but being the wrong color made me stand out. So I learned to be smart. I kept my head down, like a lot of these other comments said. Get off the bus, power walk home, play video games. One day I hear what sounds like fireworks so I turn down the computer speakers. It's gunshots. Lots and lots of gunshots. I don't remember the whole story but some tweakers were holed up in their house firing shots off at some gangbangers outside with fully automatic weapons on each side. A stray bullet hit an innocent person a few houses down. She was shot in the head and died before she hit the pavement. I haven't thought about this in years, but I'm sure her kids have had a hard life since then. Sending good vibes their way. You can keep your head down all you want, but there are terrible people in those places that do not understand how their actions can affect the world around them. If anybody reads this and thinks they're stuck in that type of situation for life, you're not. I got out and I'm doing just fine. Start reading. The library is free. You don't need a plan. Just strive to be better. My first year living in Japan, the school put me in the apartment building they owned which was in the middle of a Yakuza neighborhood. I think that the school bought that building for their teacher housing because it was super cheap since no one else really wanted to live in that neighborhood and the school assumed that the foreigners just wouldn't notice what was going on and that nearly every building around them was a brothel. One of the other teachers was married to a Japanese man who told us what to look out for and how to act if we ever came across the large group of black cars. Men wearing a certain style of suit especially if they were guarding the entrance to a spa, or if the police blocked off a street and showed up in SWAT gear, all of which happened from time to time. In general, it wasn't bad and people left the foreigners alone. After living in that neighborhood a while and leaving for work with another teacher I was friends with every day, the women who worked in the brothels started to recognize us and would say good morning to us when we passed them on the streets. One morning, the other teacher was sick and I went to work on my own on my bicycle. On my way home, 2 of the women who worked at one of the bigger brothels came outside when they saw me stopped at a stoplight next to their building. They were very concerned and between their bits of English and my bits of Japanese they were able to ask me where my friend was and I was able to communicate that she was sick but would be back at work in a day or 2. I've heard gunshots in the past, and my area is a prime illegal racing track. Skid marks can be found all up on the streets if you just go looking for them. It mostly happens at night, so I just let it happen. It just causes a lot of ruckus is all. I live in a poor suburban neighborhood in Ohio, in case you're wondering. Grew up in a small town with less than 6,000 people nestled in a valley with 2 other small towns. Were nicknamed M Valley by neighboring cities. Day to day was pretty mundane, but there are some things that I now realize probably aren't normal. We weren't allowed to be barefoot ever because the entire neighborhood was littered with used needles. When we tried to plant some flowers we dug up at least 20. The family across the street's son even stepped on one when he was playing in their backyard. Speaking of needles, they find them in the KFC bathroom in town. Can't go to the one park for the same reason. Along with needles, people has also put razor blades on some of the play equipment. Can't go to the other park because that's where the drug dealers hang out. Can't go to the other park because there's always gunshots coming from it. The gas station that was across from my house gets robbed at least twice a year. The neighbors' kids used to break into our shed before we moved in to smoke weed and do H. We found out because they told us when we moved in. Our elementary school janitor was a pedophile who got moved to the high school once it was discovered. He also used to mix up weird milk flavors and hand them out to kids before recess. I remember the blue one make several of us violently ill. The yellow one was defiantly the best. At least once a year some guy get pee off and shots his wife in their house, barn or a field, which causes people to flock to it once it goes up for sale, as murder houses are usually sold off cheap. Last time I went back to visit they found a teen's body on some railroad tracks, a guy's body under a bridge, and there was a police standoff in the middle of town all in the same day. Cops were around a lot but I didn't really notice a lot of things. Just this one guy being shot to death just outside my flat. I never saw it but heard about 30 shots suddenly at 1 AM. In another neighborhood this guy was shot in the head just outside the flat as well. I think last year about 7 people were shot within 2 kilometers from my flat. Welcome to Sweden. It became more annoying than concerning when an ambulance was blocking the road into the neighborhood because that first house was a crack den and someone would OD at least once a week. Don't bother anyone and they usually won't bother you. Don't investigate weird noises. Either it isn't any of your business or going to check on it isn't worth it. It's not your business until it's inside your house. Probably don't check those sex offender registries online. You're already going to be taking the precautions that'll prevent anything. No sense in making you feel nauseous. Had a lot of boys catcall me or grope me briefly, so I started carrying a little keychain pepper spray bottle. Had to use it once and the individual actually got in trouble with the police, so I consider that a win. After my divorce, I ended up in a super bad neighborhood of Sac. Mid-30s white guy. It was a heavily Hispanic and Russian ghetto. Gunshots nightly. Car broken in 2. Fights. Homeless I had to kick off my doorstep frequently. Oddly enough, never had a problem. I walked to the liquor store at night when I needed crap. Never had a problem. I just walked around like I didn't give a frick. Not like I wanted to start crap, but also like I wasn't worried about it either. My neighbors, even the bangers, never fricked with me. Were always cool. I said hey what's up? Weed smell 24/7. Drug dealing across the hall. Oddly enough, I saw crap daily, but was never really worried about me. I lived in a pocket of Korean American immigrants in the middle of a rough Chicago neighborhood. One of the more gang concentrated neighborhoods. Lots of crime. Police sirens just about nightly in the neighborhood. I could walk around by myself at any time of the night and be fine. This was true for the vast majority of us. Out of hundreds of Koreans, maybe only a handful of us were the victims of a crime over the course of decades. I later learned that this was because if an Asian was victimized, police would take the crime seriously. So the gangs avoided targeting the Asians if possible, because police were a lot less likely to pursue or respond to a crime targeting any of the black or Mexican people in the area. I made friends with a lot of kids that would grow up to be in gangs as a result. Never had any trouble from them. But maybe that's because I didn't act afraid or treat them differently. One kid I knew since I was about 8 I learned was hooked on coke and other drugs by his dad when he was 6 so that he would be suckered into being a drug mule. They were both deported to Mexico when we were about 13, which probably took away any chance he had at a normal life. The local church was putting a lot of effort into helping him spend time away from gang life. I think a lot of racism people have comes from the fact that they don't encounter people portrayed negatively in ways that try to make that portrayal representative of a culture. They then choose to see these things like black culture is corruptive and crime infested instead of Chicago push the criminal elements into low income neighborhoods so they could control the crime better, and a kid raised in those ghettos for 18 years is going to have some hurdles to get through. It has nothing to do with skin color, which sadly too many people fail to understand. When I was lucky enough to meet a lovely lady, we moved to her town instead of mine. Upon looking at a house in what my partner, an estate agent, said was a rough area, I immediately started looking for needles and broken condoms on the floor. Both of them looked at me really funny and said, "What are you doing?" So I explained. They both laughed and said, "No, we mean the kids might knock on your door and run away." I sat there dumbfounded. That's classed as rough too. That my experience was so far removed from my partners and the estate agent that they thought it was funny. 3. That I am so glad I moved. I've lived in every borough in NY, besides Staten Island for obvious reasons. I've lived in sketchy neighborhoods. The worst crap. In all honesty, the mentally unhealthy drug addict old lady who told me I was a drug dealer, devil and freaking putrid killer etc every dang morning. And anytime I saw her in the afternoon, but morning mostly, she was always around the train stop I went to work. I saw her. I tried buying her coffee and tea. I tried other crap. It didn't matter. I was a devil drug dealing butthole, and honestly months and months of that gets to wear on you, lol. Obviously I gave her a huge pass as she was sick and homeless etc. I think once I asked if I could help her to a shelter or something and she went ape crap. So yeah, didn't miss her when I left. Gang kids are scary cause they're just kids and don't give a crap. Crime and harassment are day to day, end up being easily ignored. Crackhead sick lady, got to me though. Man, I didn't live in what would typically be considered a crap neighborhood. In fact, it was way out in the middle of nowhere. But my neighbors were always shooting at each other. One threatened to kill my dog cause he liked play with his cows and the other stole my freaking chickens. I kinda just hate everyone now. The kids had a secret knock that was basically crap went down lemon. My friend used it with me when a drug dealer broke in looking for his money. He had the wrong house he wanted to do 2 doors down. Thankfully when I was young there seemed to be an unspoken rule of don't frick with kids, as looking back they had been several shady characters who would leave the alleyway if they saw us playing, which we almost always had been. I lived in Guatemala for the first 12 years of my life. We lived in a lower middle class neighborhood that was kind of controlled by a gang. They would ask businesses for protection money and would prey on teenagers to convince them to join, but they wouldn't really mess with the people beyond that. When I turned 10 I was allowed to go to the corner store for the first time. A couple of the gang members were inside talking to the owner. I went with my older cousin who must have recognized them and asked me to not say anything and to let her go up to pay. I did and waited by the door. She paid and we turned to leave the store when one of the dudes yelled, "Hey, how old are you?" We ignored them and kept walking. For 2 weeks after this I would come back from school and see them at the corner store, just standing, always staring at us and our street. We received a call one day asking if I lived there. Somehow they knew my name. My grandparents, who were taking care of me at the time, cut the phone line and began driving me to school. I could no longer take the bus with my cousins. One day as my grandpa was driving me to school, 2 dudes pulled up next to us at a light. They were on a motorcycle, both wearing helmets, so I couldn't really see their face. All I remember is that I recognized the voice. It was the same dude from the store. He pulled up to the passenger seat window to ask me if I wanted to join him for a ride. I was beyond scared, so I didn't make a sound. My grandpa stepped on the gas as soon as the light turned, and after this I went to spend a month with my cousins who lived 40 minutes from the city. I still remember his voice. Everything everyone is saying is right, but the thing that drove me the craziest is just the amount of noise around the clock. Cop cars, ambulances and fire trucks, loud music from your neighbors who just don't give a frick, guns going off, crazy people screaming at all hours of the night, pimps arguing with H. The list just goes on. You start to go a little crazy yourself because you can't get an uninterrupted night of sleep, and then when you wake up you still in the ghetto. My car was broken into so many times, 4, that I started leaving it unlocked. All 4 times there was nothing inside. No coins, nothing. I kept the paperwork in my wallet. After I left it unlocked, I would often sit down in it in the morning and the glove box was opened, the sun visors flipped down. Someone got in and rummaged around and left, but at least my window wasn't broken. Disclaimer: YMMV, I urge you to do whatever you feel is best for your neighborhood. I think I was dealing primarily with crapheads and junkies, but none of them wanted to hotwire the car and try to pawn sell it, so they never drove it off. Separate thing. I had a guy run a scam where he pushed a lawnmower around pretending to look for work, but he was actually casing joints for theft and talking to people. Also tried to sell weed. I know this because I asked how I could help and what was broken on his mower. He said the spark plug. Well, but today's your lucky day. I bought a multipack for my car and I have 2 left over since it's only a V4. I bet it would fit. Let me get my wrench. When I got my tools to help, he was gone. Why on earth would he leave if someone offered to fix his mower for free? Thinking emoji. When I was way younger, I lived in a bad neighborhood until I was 6. But everyone kinda just was more impoverished and bad to each other. Yeah, cars got robbed, but it wasn't that bad. My mom would feed all the kids on the street every day at lunch. You learn to keep your head down. Don't gossip. Stay inside. You don't own flashy things and you try to stay under the radar. Source: grew up poor until my teens. Lived in really crappy places during university. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.